Hello, welcome to the last panel in English from the II International Burnout Awareness Week. This event has taken place since Monday, November 29, and we're having the closing today on December 3rd and is broadcast by YouTube. There will be more than we had in total, over 20 panels, I think, already from over 5 countries in English and Portuguese, with specialists on the subject and people who have lived and are living through the syndrome. The purpose of this event is to responsibly raise awareness around burnout and help eliminate the stigma surrounding it, in addition to intensifying the dissemination of its causes, consequences, and treatments. The panels are divided into tracks, including health and well-being, culture and society, the role of organization, and burnout stories, as the one we're seeing today. This content does not substitute appropriate treatment with a healthcare professional. When listening to these stories, if you feel like you need help, contact a healthcare qualified professional. We encourage the conscious consuming of content when you're watching us here. You can watch us whenever you can, the way you can, for as long as you can. This may be a lot, and we do not expect you to be on top of everything in this event and in life. Some concepts may be a little bit complex or triggering for you. If you need to take a break and breathe, that's okay. The talks will be available in the very same links for you to come back and watch them whenever you want and can. This year, the event is sponsored by Zen Club, a Brazilian online mental health platform that has a network of experts such as psychologists, psychoanalysts, and therapists. We are also grateful for the support of Instituto Bem-do-Estar, another Brazilian company. This one is a nonprofit organization that aims to promote health of the mind. And today we are joined here to talk about how is it to go back to work after having a burnout. And I'm joined here by my dear Katy Mann. She's a writer. She has written 2 books. One is Avoiding Burnout, and the second one is Harnessing Stress. And now she works as an Agile master at BMW, and she's all the way in South Africa. Welcome, Katy. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much. I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today.
Great. It's very good to see you again. Katy was with us last year in the first Awareness Week. And so for whoever hasn't heard your story, and also sometimes it's good that we retell our story because we think of other details and we always change it a little bit and we evolve the way we tell our own stories. So why don't we start by you sharing with us your story with burnout?
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I think what many people will have come to realize is that burnout is as unique as we are. So my burnout will not look like your burnout in any way. And my experience of it was that it triggered an autoimmune disease. So I triggered a thyroid disease. So that's something then I will have to manage for the rest of my life. And there's a lot of costs associated with that. Financial, the medical fees and bills with all the blood tests and the doctor's visits. I have to be on medication for the rest of my life. And I had to change my diet. I had to really watch what I eat now. So it's had quite significant costs. And the other aspect, I think, was chronic fatigue. Oh, we've got a visitor there.
we have. This is, I think, the 20th panel, and she has never felt like showing up, but apparently now she wants to be the star. Is that enough for you? Okay, that was Mia, ladies and gentlemen. Please,
yeah.
You can continue.
She must know I'm a cat lover. That's why she's coming.
Yes.
Yeah. So the chronic fatigue for me that lasted 3 years. So I think by typical definitions of burnout, that's too long. It's almost a year too long. And I think I've figured out, it's taken me some time to figure out the reasons behind that. It took some unpacking. But for 3 years of my life, I wasn't able to work a full day because I was just too fatigued. I had to give up my sport. So I used to be an ultra marathon runner. I used to run long marathons. And I had to give that up because I couldn't really sustain it anymore. So those 3 years were very, very difficult looking back, I must say. Yeah. I wouldn't want to live them again, but as you say, there's also everyone, you start to see different things in it, and as time goes on, and it's been quite a few years since that happened, I now see a lot more of the gifts than I did in the beginning.
Yeah. For sure. So the difference between last year's Katy and this year's Katy is that now you have taken up a full-time job. So, and this is very interesting for whoever's watching in the recorded version or in the live broadcast, that we have these, we become very afraid, and sometimes we become traumatized by the trauma itself or traumatized by stress. So that we feel like we cannot ever go back to having a full-time job, or we choose not to. So why don't you tell us also, how was it for you? And why did you decide to go back to a full-time job, and how it has been for you?
Okay. So I think there were some interesting triggers, because when I got very sick, I think the main source of the burnout was my work environment. So when I was recovering, and because it was so dramatic, I told myself, I'm never going back into that work environment. I'm never going back to an office. I now live a different life. And I found writing, and I wrote books, and I did all the speaking and all these workshops. And I thought, this is my career now. I almost swung from one extreme of this, technology, serious world and finance and things, I swung to the opposite, to the creative, and I'm just going to be the struggling artist, and I'm going to do that,
Yeah.
That was what I did, which made sense at the time. But then I think the trigger was really COVID. So what happened was I was spending a lot of time, writing books and articles and doing speaking events and wellness functions and networking, so I had many, many networking events every week. I would go to these events and sell books and make contacts and find new events. So all of that just collapsed when COVID hit. So that then made me wonder, oh dear, what am I supposed to do now? And there were many people who were so good at that. They pivoted and they decided to start manufacturing masks and doing all these crazy things, but I didn't do any of that. I was quite shell shocked. I just didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And I think the reason what I did instead is that, I live by my values very much, and my family, my children, I've got 2 little girls, and it was quite traumatic for them to stop going to school and to try and adjust to the online way of schooling. So that was a new thing, particularly for my youngest. So she was 8 years old and she needed a lot of help. Yeah. So I thought, well, my work has just come to an abrupt end. Let me just throw my energy and effort into supporting my kids. So, I remember these days where I followed them around in the garden and we found a brick and we're measuring for maths, for area and perimeter. And we did all these things and I just helped them kind of adjust. Yeah. But, after a year or so, they were back full time at school and the schools opened and things were almost back to normal with just a few measures to keep them safe. And then I found that I didn't really know what to do with myself. Yeah. So I felt underutilized. I feel like I'm a lifelong learner. I need to be learning. And you can only read so many books. You can only watch so many webinars. And then you get to a point where, I felt like I wasn't positively contributing to the world. I wasn't feeding my mind. I wasn't taking on big challenges. And I felt ready for it. And I think that's the important thing that the audience should know. Yeah. I was sick for 3 years. And then for 3 years, I did my writing and speaking and everything. And in that time, I wasn't earning much. And my husband kept saying, it's time for you to go back to work. We kind of on one salary. I think we need more income. And I was saying, well, I'm not going down that burnout path. There's no way I'm letting that happen to myself again. So I was very afraid. But I think with the COVID events, I got to a point where I no longer felt afraid. I felt more bored and more frustrated and underutilized than I felt afraid to enter the workplace. So I think that became the catalyst for me to then start looking and investigating, trying to find some options of my way back into the office.
And how was it? What did you take into consideration when you decided that this was a necessary shift for you? What did you take into consideration in terms of what kind of job I'm looking for, what kind of company am I looking for, what kind of position am I looking for? Because you had a really high rank job when you had your burnout. So how were all of these decisions for you to take when coming back to the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I was in a bit of a quandary because I couldn't become you don't jump back into a managing director role that has low stress and a half day. It's not that easy to find. Yeah. So I was very concerned about what I should do. And I was quite torn. Do I follow the wellness path that I'm so passionate about now, and stress and well-being? Or do I lean back on my trade, which was software? So I was a bit torn in the beginning. And a friend actually gave me an opportunity. I connected with a reflexology academy. So they teach reflexology. And they needed me to help do some writing and help with their online courses. So I thought that was a very nice opportunity for me, because I could do some writing, which was a skill. It was in wellness, and that was fun. So I did that for about 5 or 6 weeks, and I helped them to deliver whatever it was that they were wanting to deliver. And what was great about that was it was quite an interim step almost. It showed me that I could cope in an office environment. It was half day. I could take my own little lunch. I managed, with a mask, and I could interact with the people. It was reasonable. I could get work done. I could contribute. I could do something meaningful. And it gave me the confidence to feel like I've got value to add still. I'm not past it. I'm not old. I'm not mentally unstable. I still have something to offer. So it was almost this like halfway, little pathway. And then after that got resolved, then I thought, no, I really, to earn proper money, I think I really need to get back into my trade. And then I leveraged all my networks and contacts to try and find offers. And what was interesting, you ask about the consideration. So I had 2 interviews and I got 2 offers. And the first interview, they said, well, we'll pay you for 8 hours, but you have to work 12. And then I looked at the work and I thought, wow, I've got 2 children. I'm, post burnout. I just don't think that's going to work. And that was my first offer of a formal software job again. And I thought it's just not a fit for my life. And maybe it's suitable for someone who's 20 years younger and got the energy and maybe no kids and they can do it. But it wasn't going to work. So it took quite a lot of courage to decline the first offer I got after such a big gap because I was so afraid.
Yes.
But I knew, being where I had been through burnout, that it wasn't going to be sustainable. I could not work 12-hour days continually in high pressure with high deadlines and only be paid for part of it. I didn't really think that was suitable. So I turned it down and just hoped and prayed that I would get something else.
Yes.
And then I got the interview with BMW, and they have a very balanced way of working in that, there's a maximum amount of hours you work a day. Instead of a minimum, there's a maximum.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm a contractor. So in terms of budget, you're only allowed to work so many hours a day, which is reasonable for them. They can manage their budgets. And then I can manage my energy. So in taking that into account, I think that was one of the big considerations. I could cope with the energy to work, say, 8.5 hours a day instead of 12 every day. So that was a big one. Yeah. And then the other considerations, I think I had to try and figure out what I'm going to do with my family and my kids and try to balance a few things there. And how do I get my exercise adjusted? So there was quite a lot of figuring things out, and, talking to my husband about, if I have a rough day and I'm tired, he's going to have to do more cooking, for example, which was fine. So I made some almost contracts with him, agreements with him to say, I'm going to have a bad day. You're going to have to step in and cook just to cope with that. And then I also paid a transport company then to lift my children home from school in the afternoon because I wasn't able to drop a meeting and then rush there. It was just too stressful and not really going to work. So I had to try and work out a few of those things before. So those were some key things I had to get organized before I started.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to hear you telling your story and how it's turning out now, because when we reach burnout, because several times there's also a lot of trauma involved. We really have that feeling of, I never want to listen to that type of wording again. I never want to be in an office again. And for some people, it will make sense. And there was an article on The Guardian that was released throughout sometime during this year. There was a case study on how people were recovering from their burnout. And I was talking to a friend who lives here, and we were discussing that the vast majority of the people who were portrayed there, they changed their careers and they all went to work on the well-being industry, which is something that we are also, we're also guilty of. That we go for that, and then we think, I want to help people, and that is very noble, and that's amazing. But we were just discussing a little bit before we started the broadcast. It's very difficult to make ends meet and to really pick up an enterprise in that sector.
It is.
And also there are so many skills and so much knowledge that we have acquired in those years. And there were good things as well. Right? Yes. When we burn out, we have all the bad memories, but there were good things as well. There were good challenges. There were good contributions. So I think it's important that eventually, and that's something that time will help us do that. It's been taking you 6 years. to start coming to terms with that. And I love that you said that you went to the opposite of the spectrum. And I think that sometimes there is in Portuguese, we use a metaphor that if you have a very stiff leaf of paper, and you roll it in one way, the only way of making it straight again, plain again, is if you roll it the other way.
Yes, exactly that. Yes.
In order to find the balance, you need to swing there. So it's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was part of the journey to find the balance, just to experience that. And I think that's the thing, like the pressure from outside could not, after the depth of my burnout, the pressure from outside could not sway me. It had to come from inside.
Yeah.
So I had to get to that point of readiness to say, actually, I think I've got something to add, and this is going to be fun. And I had to enter it with that mindset. If I entered it with this mindset of like, oh, I hate this, it's terrible, I'm so desperate, it's awful, I wouldn't have enjoyed the experience of going back to work nearly as much as I have been. I really had to be ready.
Yeah, completely. That's so true. And one thing that I think it's also remarkable to think about is that we have this heritage of a way of thinking of a career that is a straight line, that you do something, you study for several years, and then that's your doom. You're gonna be doing that until you retire. And now we don't even know if we're ever going to retire, so things are a little bit more complicated. Yes. And burnout just severs your career, and it gives you this hopelessness of, what am I going to do? What am I good at? And the things I used to be good at, I don't want to do anymore. And then you start building something else. And what I have been seeing as well with my experience, I haven't gone to a full-time job the same way as you've done, but I'm paralleling the work that I'm doing as a writer, as a speaker, with some freelancing projects that I decide a limit of how many hours a week. Yeah. So it's no more than 15 to 20 a week for these freelancing gigs. And I've been finding that really, really, really good, because it also takes my mind away of the burnout.
Exactly.
Which is something we don't talk enough. That when we work with this, it's interesting. There's a purpose behind it and everything, but it can be overwhelming as well.
Yes, it's all consuming. And I love the way that you're balancing that, because that's exactly, and what happened in that when I started working, in July, I thought, okay, well, this burnout stuff and this writing, it's over now. I need to close that chapter and move forward. And oh, well, that was a phase of my life, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that all of a sudden, as soon as I started working, all these opportunities came my way. Will you do workshops? Will you do talks for us? And then I was in this position where I thought, what do I do now? I've got this full-time job. If I stretch myself too thin, I'm going to burn out again. But I'm also interested. So just picking up on what you said about it distracts you from the burnout. I almost feel that for me, it's also the other way. So if I've had a busy day at work and I'm tired and things like that, in the evening, I might then have an interview or a talk or a speech about burnout and my books, which is a very nice distraction from my day job too. So it's almost, for me, it's been fun to try to integrate the two. And I did quite a few. I did 3 talks and events in September. November, I've written an article and done a couple of events, and that they happen in the evenings or early morning. I think with India and their timing, I'm able to do a very early morning one on the 13th of December. I've planned that. So it just almost detracts from, the humdrum of work. When you're having a rough day, you think, oh, well, I've got a fun conversation with Carol tonight. It's going to be nice. It is good to blend the two. I find that it's really rewarding for me to still keep that part of my life and myself going.
It is, and it's really interesting. So Renata is watching us, and she's cheering you on your refusal to go into a contract that would have you working 12 hours a day. Bravo for that. And it's really important that you mentioned that, because we really feel like we are not valuable to the market anymore.
Yes.
And then we get very torn. Are they willing to pay us? And then if we find someone who is willing to pay us, then we think, okay, you can do whatever you want because you're still paying us.
Yes.
or so it's a challenge to find a way where you can find a place where people are willing to pay for your work properly,
Yes.
and also set your own boundaries. There's no, and what's important in our talk today is that people understand there's not an ideal world. We will have to compromise a little bit, but
Yes.
and I think that right after a burnout, you have to be a little bit more extreme in some things because you're not used to setting boundaries. You're not used to thinking about work in a way that is not overachieving. But
Yes.
eventually you start understanding how much you can compromise in a way that doesn't break you.
Yes, yes, and that's what I love with the BMW philosophy is that there are there's a lot of balance. There's a lot of people go on vacation even in very stressful and busy time periods at work with big deadlines. People still prioritize their vacation, which is so nice. So that's part of the culture, and I find that's the perfect opportunity for me to thrive because I couldn't have worked, and I even the other job was at a bank, and I asked some friends about that, the nature of that department and that kind of bank, and they said, wow, it is so high stress and there's so much pressure.
Mhm.
And it was almost a job function that took me back more than 15 years in my career. So that value, I was thinking, oh, I'm not valuable anymore because I've burnt out and I've got this gap and I'm also older and I've got all these things that are not going for me. So I was very afraid to make that. And I didn't even want to tell my husband because I thought he would be so angry with me that I finally got an offer and I said no. But I had to. For my own survival, I had to. And the next thing, I just want people to know that there's hope. The next offer I
Yes.
got was this really nice one that blends everything I need. I've got freedom and flexibility. I can add value. I can leverage all my experience from my past. And it's actually working out really well for me. It's really balanced and I'm very, very happy. And yeah, I want people to know that don't be afraid to turn down jobs that are not aligned with your well-being and your long-term goals and even your values. Really, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And one thing that trauma does to you as well is it changes your work perspective, so it makes you feel like every workplace can be a threat.
Yes.
So
Yes.
eventually with time you start, but the way of healing that, at least for me, it's being with really tiny steps. So this project that I'm doing, for instance, I started with one project of 1 week, like just like you had with the reflexology course, and then you start building the relationship. And I was hired by a third party, which is a it's called Upwork. It's kind of a Uber, not an Uber, but it's a third party that connects freelancers and companies.
Ah,
And we're doing a direct contract now. And the CEO of the company said, "You're one of the slowest people in terms of how quick we got from this intermediate contract to a direct contract." And I said, "I don't think that's bad because I think it was important that we had someone in the
yes.
middle to make sure that it was a good relationship and to
Yes.
make sure that we could trust each other. So I'm not in a hurry." And then he said, "Yeah, actually you're right, because I have rushed that sometimes, and then
Mhm.
sometimes I didn't get my end of the bargain. So that's maybe
Yes.
that's a wise thing."
Yes, taking
And
it slower. Yeah. And I
yeah,
think that's also, it's hard for us overachievers, because the people who burn out are going to be the overachievers. And we want to dive in and give everything. And, we care so
yeah,
much, we give so much. So I do have a very interesting program manager in our area who told me I need to resign from being the manager of the universe because I'm trying to control everything and make things work. So he said it's not your responsibility to make the whole universe work, which is great because then I feel like, okay, I can relax and I can just do the best I can do with the piece that I have. So
exactly.
that's really a good philosophy and a good support around me, I think, which helps. And I love your approach of taking it slow. I think that's a really good way to do it. And with COVID, the online work and the being able to work from anywhere in the world, to freelance, those opportunities have opened up more now than ever. So that at least is in our favor in getting back
Yeah.
into the workplace.
Yeah. So what are the challenges and the benefits of going? So are you doing remote work? How is that working now?
Yes, so I do remote work most of the time. It depends. When I joined, we were in the middle of a third wave with the Delta variant. So there was a lot of, I basically went in for an hour to collect my laptop, and then I was online for the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, presented a challenge in terms of integrating into the team when you're online is quite difficult.
Yeah.
So I've never experienced having to build relationships with people just over the screen, and we don't have a lot of cameras on. So it's just a voice behind the screen. So that I found as one of the challenges of integrating into a new team and learning. You know, if you're in an office environment, you walk around and you pick things up and you can ask people. But when you're on your own at home, you do feel a little removed from the team dynamic. So that was one challenge. Then when things quietened down after our third wave, the offices opened up to a capacity of about 75%. And what we do is we've got a system where you book your spot to make sure that it's not, too many people in the office. So they're very responsible. Mm-hmm. And that was great. So I could go in once or twice a week. There's 2 different offices. So I spread it across those so that I could meet different people who meet those, attend those offices. And then the rest of the time was at home. So I found at home, I got better balance just because of the traffic and the commute. So with the commute, it's quite far. And on the days that I had to go in, then I can't exercise. There isn't really enough time to fit that in the day. So that's why I also like being at home. I can fit in a short exercise in the morning and I also get a lot done. I find there's less distractions when I'm at home. There's no people talking to you and chit-chatting and things. You just focus on your work and get it done. So I've enjoyed that kind of thing. In terms of other challenges, I think what was fascinating was after I burnt out, I think I surrounded myself with very nurturing and kind and supportive people, like you and Dr. Jerry and all of those people that have experienced similar things. And the friendships I sought out were a very comforting and supportive tribe of people. And it took me a little bit by surprise entering the workforce again when there are people that are quite hostile.
Yeah.
There's the people with the egos and the people aggressive, and there's a bit of the political shenanigans like in every corporate. So I think that was interesting for me because I'd forgotten about what it was like in a big office like that. And I realized, but what is interesting is for me, it's a different experience than how I used to handle it. So I used to take things very personally and be very upset by, someone disagreeing with me or, being a bit aggressive. But now I just, I realize it's not about me and that's not my stuff. So I've been better at forming almost an invisible boundary there to say, well, that's somebody else is going through something challenging. Maybe they're having a difficult situation in their lives and maybe that's why they're feeling like that. And it's not my fault and it's got nothing to do with me. So I've been able to separate that in a way that's probably a bit more mature than I used to. I used to really take that on and not be able to sleep and take it so personally, but not so much anymore. I think I've maybe grown up a little bit as part of the burnout.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the challenge. I think those are the main sort of challenges. And, you spoke a bit about devaluing yourself or not seeing your value. I've struggled a lot. I think my whole life I've struggled to see my own value. That's been a consistent theme. And I've noticed for the first 3 months, just before I got my salary, I had almost a mini crisis, like, oh, they're about to pay me all this money and am I worth it? And, especially since I was new, I was still learning. So I wasn't really, contributing as much back as I felt I could.
Yeah.
But I had a little bit of a crisis moment, for 2 or 3 days before the money came in, just wondering, oh, are they I felt that imposter syndrome, they're going to realize that I can't handle it or I'm not suitable for this job and they're going to kick me out any day now. But that hasn't happened to date. So
yeah. Oh my God, I totally relate to that. but it's really and what I see is that it feels like in this period where we were at home and doing the internal work, we were doing the training, and now it's game on.
Yeah.
Right?
I think all the tools that I gained along the way, all the concepts and how to be more resilient and figuring out how do I, put those boundaries in place and how am I kinder to myself, just strengthening my own resolve and taking that time to do it, I think has made me be able to enter the workforce a lot stronger than I would have if I did maybe, 2 years in. I would have really battled to try to do that. Yeah.
Yes. And how I've talked to a psychologist, a Brazilian psychologist. On Tuesday, we did a panel on possible treatments in terms of psychology. She lives in Switzerland, and she said that in Switzerland, the way back to work is part of the recovery process, is part of the treatment. And it is an approach that I have never seen it phrased like that. I think, at least, that the coming back to work is part of the therapy.
Yes.
And
it is because there was huge fear and doubt for me. Those few days before my first day, I was absolutely terrified. On my first day, I was so nervous, I got lost. I was terrified that maybe I can't handle the full day of work. Maybe my energy levels won't cope with it. And what do I do? I've let people down and disappointed people. I was so afraid of that. And so now knowing that I can manage, I can actually hold down the job and I'm enjoying it and I get something out of it too. And they're actually willing to pay me. So it's really cool.
Renata has a question. Did you share with your coworkers about your burnout?
Not immediately. So it took some time. I think I did connect with a lot of people on LinkedIn. So as soon as they saw my profile with there was no hiding from it. And I had a moment where I thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that. maybe I should have tried to keep the burnout a little bit on the side. But I think it's better that people know me. And the more that people understand burnout and where I've come from, the more supportive they can be. So I think, in the interview with my manager and a couple of other participants from the panel and the human resources people and that, it was obvious that I'd, experienced the burnout and I did talk about it. So I really, there's no point in trying to hide it. There's no great secret there. But I didn't outwardly come and say, hey, you know what, I've burnt out. But I think it was obvious to anyone who's following me on LinkedIn then that that's my history. And I've talked about it with a few colleagues, but not really in depth. I think I'm also moving to a point where I don't want to really wallow in the misery of the burnout. I'm really looking at the gift of it and what it gave me, which is a whole fresh life and the ability to choose the people in my life and how I want my life to look and my boundaries and my self-worth. All those things have strengthened through the burnout. So I really see, if I'm going to talk about it, it's usually about the gifts, about what came out on the other side. And that only comes with quite a few years of hindsight. Doesn't happen straight away.
You're absolutely right. So talking about hindsight, if we can compare, if you could see in front of you the three versions of Katy, today's Katy, 2020's Katy, and pre-burnout Katy, who are these three Katys?
Wow. The pre-burnout Katy, I think, was had a big need to be liked, was very worried about making other people upset and making sure that everybody's needs were met except her own. She didn't feel entitled to rest. She didn't feel entitled to joy or happiness or fun or any of those things. So when I think about that version of me, I feel quite heartsore that I got to that stage, that I really didn't feel entitled to even look after myself to a proper point. So that's it's quite sad to think about. She was really, and fascinatingly, I think at the time she thought she had it all together. She thought she was really rocking it, like running all these marathons and running a company and, I can do anything. And that was just never going to last, so that was kind of funny when I look back. It was not really ever going to work out well.
Yeah.
And I think last year's Katy was very, I suppose, unsure of what the future holds. The concern of what do I do now? I'm now in COVID times. I can't do the work that I love. I'm confused and conflicted about how do I take this step forward, you know? But this version of me now, I mean, I feel much more like I've overcome so much. I've been brave enough to step back into the world, and I can do it. And that's led to so much more confidence. I feel like I can really tackle life again. And, you know, I'm not that old. I'm in my 40s. I still have, you know, a couple of decades of hard work in me still. And I don't want to wallow in misery, and I don't want to spend too much time in that self-doubt place that the 2020 Kathy was in, you know, worrying about how to make my passion work. It just wasn't working. I had to really walk away. I had to reach a point where I realized that was not working anymore. And, you know, that's also the blessing of COVID. There have been some good outcomes. It has been tough and lots of suffering and lots of losses in the world, but it's also enabled us to work online. It's enabled me to get back into the workplace. So there are some wins there too.
Yeah. So before we go to our closing question, your most recent book that you launched last year was called Harnessing Stress. How are you harnessing your stress now?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that you asked that. I think when I wrote my first book, Avoiding Burnout, I was so shocked that stress could cause so much harm. And I wanted to warn people, I wanted to help people not go down that path. And that was the whole purpose of the book. And I think hopefully some people who've read it have benefited in some way from that. But I think that the difference 2 years later, writing Harnessing Stress, is that through the journey of writing that book, I learned so many things about how stress can be good for you. You know, and I'm living that now more than ever, in that, you know, I think it was last week or the week before, a friend asked me to write this article, and it was a really tight deadline. She said to me, literally, it's due yesterday, and I need you to write 4 pages, 4 full A4 pages on a topic that I had never even considered before. And of course, I have a full-time job. So I thought, oh, how am I going to manage this thing? And then I started to feel like, you know what, it's actually having a deadline is the best thing, because it just drives me. I set aside 2 hours. I did a little bit of looking up, a bit of brainstorming. I wrote, and then I you know, edited, fixed the draft, checked that it all flowed nicely, rearranged a few things, and then I submitted it. And then I had to let it go. I could, if I had another week, I would have obsessed about it and thought about it and woken up in the night thinking, oh, I must add that. You know, it would have just... And the value added might not have made that much difference, to be honest. I think having that rush of the stress, that is the challenge response in action. And I could feel my physiology ramping up the energy to say, oh, you've got something due. You need to move on this. And that's the kind of one example of how I harness stress. I think I now have an appreciation for my physiology, my body, that's saying, oh, this is important. You care about this. I'm giving you a little bit of a surge so that you can get through this next chapter. And that I value now. I used to feel scared when I felt stress, but I don't fear stress anymore. Now I feel like I welcome it, and it's helping to build me into a stronger version of me. So my whole thinking around stress has shifted through the journey of writing that book, I think.
Awesome. And well, for us to go to our closing, what would you say to someone who is afraid of going back to work after a burnout?
Yeah, I would say that if I could do it, you can definitely do it, because my burnout was very extreme. It wasn't mild. It wasn't a 6-month experience. It was a 3-year full-on health collapse that changed my entire life and me quite deeply. So if I feel that I can still come back into the world and I can contribute and I've got things to do and I've got the energy for it. Energy is a big thing. I keep mentioning that because when you have chronic fatigue, you're always worried about your energy,
Yeah.
So for me, I'm always worried about the energy side of things. I'm thinking, do I have enough energy to cope with that or to accommodate these kind of activities or goals? But if I feel like I could come back and work a full day, chat to people and contribute, add value, I can still exercise about 4 times a week, I have enough energy to chat to my kids and to play with them, cook a meal for my family. I've got enough of that energy despite everything that I've been through. And if that can happen for me, then it can happen for you.
Yeah. Amazing. And finally, what are the transformations that you see that something like a burnout can promote and influence on an individual and collective level?
Okay, wow, that's a beautiful question. For me personally, I think I've learned about how to think more resilient. So my thinking, I've really applied a lot of attention to what my thoughts look like. I've learned a tremendous amount in terms of tools, like how do I use affirmations? I've embedded journaling and gratitude into my life as a result of it. So the burnout experience, excuse me, because it bottomed out my life so much, I was able to really pick and choose all of these different strategies that I could build in my life with. So those are the benefits and the aspects that I've now incorporated into my everyday life. So I do affirmations every day, I journal every day. All those things can really boost us. And I think collectively, the fact that so many people are experiencing burnout now enables us to have more compassion about the topic. So I think when I first burnt out, that was at the end of 2014, and people treated me like there was something wrong with me. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think collectively enough people have become sick, which is sad in itself. But I think we have a greater common compassion for each other, knowing that we've done that. So I think there's that topic of post-traumatic growth. So when you've been through something traumatic like burnout, some people will emerge as a stronger version of themselves. And I think together, if we support each other, we can lift each other up. And instead of having the judgment of you're mentally ill or there's something wrong with you that you burnt out, more let's support each other and create the kind of world where people don't have to burn out before they learn something.
Awesome. It reminds me of something that Dr. Jerry mentioned yesterday in the panel, that she has been seeing with her most recent researches, that a lot of the people who go through burnouts, they emerge eventually with something that is what is in the Maslow's pyramid of needs, the self-actualization.
Yes.
And that was really, for me, was one of the most interesting insights of recent time, because it is really something that actually happens, that I see in you as well, that I see in myself, and in a lot of people who have been able to make it to the other side, is that we really have this feeling of self-actualization, of I feel good in my own skin, I feel like I'm contributing, and that is really powerful.
Yeah, I think the meaning that's come out for me, I find I'm much more intentional about the way I live now. And that wouldn't have happened without the burnout. I choose my relationships on purpose. I choose the work I want to live, how I spend my time, how I engage with my children. All of those things are purposeful and with much more attention. Instead of just reacting and living life, just reacting to what comes at you. So that is a beautiful way of putting it, that self-actualization.
Yeah. So thank you, Kathy, so much for being here, for talking to us, for sharing your story especially. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time and attention to all the panels in English we've had this year. They are immensely valuable to us. If you want to request a participation certificate in Portuguese, you can go to the link that I'm leaving in the chat right now. Keep helping us raise awareness and fight stigma. We'll be back Next year, we still have 2 panels in Portuguese, but in English, we will be back in 2022, November 28th until December 2nd. So you can add that to your agenda already. Save the date. I have no idea what's going to be in the world in 22, but I'm pretty sure we're going to have a burnout awareness week. And
yes.
I hope that Kathy is with us again, hopefully to share even more good news with us. Renata is saying, thank you, Kathy. You inspired me a lot and gave me a shot of courage to go back to work.
Good, awesome. Go for it. Wonderful.
Really
thank you, Carol, for organizing this amazing event. It's really a pleasure. And thank you for your contribution towards burnout awareness in the world.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Take care and